Good evening and welcome here in the David Cato debate tent at Pride Week. So we're going to have a talk about the METU Pride and the Turkish LGBTI plus situation. I want to tell you that this debate is going to be live streamed and it is possible to ask questions online as well if there's something you would like to ask the panel here. But I will just want to give the word to Lars, who is going to moderate this talk.
As the bells are tolling, it's a great joy for me to say welcome both to all of you here in the tent, but also to Melike Balkan and Bushra Maden from METU Pride in Ankara in Turkey, who are, and I'm going to ask you to introduce yourselves in a second, but are part of the organizing committee behind METU Pride, the Pride at the Middle Eastern Technical University in Ankara, which was raided by police about a year and a half ago now, and quite violently so. So first, Melike and Bushra, can I ask you to give a short introduction of yourselves? Oh, I should say, by the way, for those of you who don't know me, I'm Lars. I am the chair of Copenhagen Pride. I use the pronouns he, his, and I'm the moderator today, so I will try to speak as little as possible and pass the word on to you. Melike.
Right. Hi. Everybody can hear me, right? Good. Okay. Hi, I'm Melike. I'm an activist with the METU LGBTI Solidarity. I've been an activist for the last 6.5 years. And I've been organizing the METU Pride March for the last 4 years. We couldn't do that this year, but for the last couple of years, yeah.
Hello, I'm Bushra Maden. I'm also an activist at the METU LGBTI Solidarity, about 4 years on and off, and I'm also a board member of our NGO, Uniqueer in Ankara.
So, Melike, can you sort of give us an outline of what it was that happened during Pride at your university campus in 2019?
Okay, so I need to start with giving just a little of background on what was happening back then. So we've been hosting Pride marches for the last 10 years, actually, the Solidarity. And ours is a very large campus. We have about 25,000 students, so it's a very large campus-wide march. And in our peak, we had about 1,000 people joining in, 1,000 students joining in on the march. And we were doing really okay, but after 2016, the Ankara governor actually created a ban, which was a ban on all LGBTI events, regardless of how big it was, on how many people were joining in. And it was a citywide ban, which was indefinite. And this ban was later found to be unconstitutional, but at the time it was in place. So in 2017, our Solidarity was the only organization in Ankara that defied this ban. We held movie screenings that were tried to be blocked by the police. We had different kind of events that all had this kind of friction between us and the administration, both the school administration and at the local government. And last year, when we did our Pride March, when we were planning it, we actually knew police was going to be there and police was going to be present, but we thought it would have been we planned the march to be as peaceful as possible, and we thought we could negotiate something with the police. But obviously they did not have that in plan, and the school administration actually spoke with the Ankara police chief and told them to raid the area and stop us at what cost. And so when they had that in plan, we were faced with police presence in our campus way before the starting time. So the starting time of the Pride March was 5 p.m. and police was present, I think, at 10 a.m. And even though they were there, people started coming out and people started coming to the march, and we had a lot of students coming in and asking us what to do. And we didn't want to put their life at risk, and we didn't want to put them in conflict with the police, so we told them to keep still and be in the same place. And we told them not to start chanting or waving the rainbow flags before we told them that it was safe to do so. And since I think it was noon that I started to talk with the police, and the police negotiations went a little like this. I was talking about the Constitution and how peaceful protests were a right that we had, and the police were saying, we are going to arrest you specifically and all of the people that are around you. So starting from a scenario like this, the police's language escalated and escalated, and at some point they became violent towards us, and they actually used specifically myself and another person from the Solidarity as targets. And this goes to show that police already knew who we were, and they were already prepared to take us into custody. So this was a scenario, and I think it was about like 4 p.m. A lot of people started to gather. I think we had about 300, 400 people that were ready to march. And I started to give a speech saying that peaceful assemblies are our rights in the Turkish Constitution and also the international agreements, and we have a right as LGBTI people to be present in the campus and all around the country. And while I was giving this speech, and while all of the people that were there for the protests were actually there in one place, police charged at us and then started arresting us without even questions. So they didn't give us any time to flee the scene. They didn't give us any time to change our location. They didn't give us any time to protect ourselves. And they started to use tear gas, and they started to use plastic bullets directly towards the crowd. And I was the first person to be arrested because I was targeted by the police. And the police attack actually lasted for 8 hours because they kept going back and they kept trying to arrest as many people as they can. And it was a very violent and brutal scene. And a lot of people got concussions and a lot of people got injuries from all of the plastic bullets that were aimed at them. And at total, we had 22 people that were arrested, 22 students, and we had one professor that was arrested with us. And out of those 23 people, actually 19 people were charged in criminal court to be defying the law. And I'm one of those people that were charged for breaking the law of peaceful assembly, and that's where we are right now. The court case is still ongoing, and we have our next court date on December.
Sorry, and just to finish on the lay of the land, so to say, what could be the consequences of a conviction for you?
So the court case is important in a couple of senses. So the most important part is that this was a student-based protest, and most of the people that were arrested were students. And this was a campus pride, and this was one of the first instances in Turkey where people that were organizing the march were actually arrested. And we came out into the courthouse and we said we were the ones that organized this march. So we didn't say we had nothing to do with this march. We were just bystanders. We didn't say that. And that was a legal route that we could take, but we chose the route of saying we are the organizers and we organize this peaceful protest and we have the right to do so. So if it's a positive result, then it's going to be a very good result for the Turkish LGBTI community in the sense that organizing pride marches is going to be certified as a legal right that you have. And if it turns out, if it's a negative result, and if we get convicted, then it's not only going to be bad for the 19 people involved, but it's going to be bad for the entire country, in a sense that if you're arrested in pride, then you're looking at criminal conviction. And yeah, we will see in December what the conclusion is going to be.
And what you said what you were charged with, but what is the punishment for not complying with the right to assemble?
Our lawyer will be better equipped to answer this, but it's up to 2 years in prison. But if you're an organizer of an event like this, then it's going to be added years onto that. And Özgür and myself, which are the two people from the Solidarity that were in the trial, we actually said that we were the organizers of the march. So we're looking at extra time on that.
And as I've understood it, in addition to that, it also entails losing your civil rights, also the right to finish your education in Turkey, and to apply for jobs within the public sector, and possibly even the right to vote. Am I correct in that?
Yes, exactly. You lose all rights to be working in the public sector, and it's really hard to apply for private sector as well, because they get information from the government. So it's really hard to work in Turkey, and at the same time, it's really hard to do your master's or doctorate in Turkey, because you cannot follow up on your education, and you won't be accepted into public universities after that. So it's a very tricky situation to be in.
And just another piece of background information, a governor in Turkey, is that a democratically elected official like a mayor, or?
So no, the governor is actually instated by the president of the country, and they can instate anyone that they want, and it's a political person usually, and they go through no selection process or election.
Is there a reason why the governor of Ankara made a more extensive ban than had been seen in any other city or department in Turkey? Because, for example, in Istanbul, it was a ban on Pride, but not a ban on all LGBTI assembly.
Yeah, so this is going to be more of a personal interpretation of what happened than like a legal explanation. But the thing is, after the coup attempt, the governor of Ankara got a lot of power. And Ankara is the capital of the country, where a lot of municipality officials are there, and then ministers are there, and all of the government buildings are there. So they decided to use this place as a template for the entire country. So the Ankara ban actually was a first try at doing it in a larger scale, because the ban in itself was unconstitutional, but at the same time it was a very hard blow on human rights, because it was not only a ban on prides, but it was on any kind of event. So if you were doing a meeting, if you were doing like a trans therapy group, if you were doing a movie screening, it was all going to be banned. So this was they were trying to silence all LGBTI voices around the country, starting from Ankara. But thankfully, our activism stopped them. And because of our activism, actually, the court case was won and by the Turkish Association, and the ban was lifted by the courts. It took 3 years, and it took a lot of effort, but after that, it was lifted.
And Bushra, can you try to explain to us the shift in attitude that we've seen in the last 10-15 years towards the LGBTI community in Turkey? I know that Istanbul Pride has been going on successfully since 1992, and only in the last 4 or 5 years have we seen bans on the Pride to march. So what has shifted, what has changed in Turkey to facilitate this change in attitudes from the government?
So again, this is a kind of a personal interpretation, but our president is kind of not on our side, and he is always pushing his homophobia and other hates to us.
Maybe I can, because we've been talking about this a lot in the recent years. So the thing is, Turkey was a very progressive country 10 years ago, because we were going into the Istanbul Agreement, we were going into EU accession, but after that, after the EU accession process failed, we decided not to be such a progressive country, and we decided to do more of our business deals with the East and the Middle Eastern countries that we have connections with. and the governments became more and more conservative in a sense, and they started to silence all of the opposing voices. Like, it's not just us, it's not just the LGBTI community, but it's ethnic backgrounds, it's religious backgrounds, and things like that. So you will be oppressed even if you try to do a march on like global warming. So if you have any kind of an opposing voice in Turkey, you are in danger of being oppressed. So that's where we are right now, and they're cracking down more and more, and especially with LGBTI people, they're targeting us every single week, and different ministers are coming out and saying being LGBT is a perversion. So things are getting worse in a sense, and things have been getting worse for the last 5 years.
I just want to, before I ask them my next question, to remind you all that you are able to ask questions as well. You just stick a hand in the air and then the microphone will be passed around. I see, as somebody who's been quite a lot in Turkey in recent years and have come to Turkey since the beginning of the 1990s quite regularly, I also see a shift in attitude towards religious issues per se, that religion becomes a bigger and bigger part in Turkish society. I remember 5 years ago suddenly hearing calls for prayer from the minarets around Hagia Sophia, and I thought, oh, that's a very big change. What will be next? And the next thing was now that Hagia Sophia is again consecrated as a mosque. So is coming from a very secular, democratic self-perception as a country, going into a more religious one, how does this serve the current government? You would think that there was great opposition from the liberal progressive Turkey to religion suddenly taking over again. How do they gain momentum on this agenda?
Oh, well, you need to ask a political major for that. But my personal views is that the thing is, power has been shifting for the last couple of years in Turkey. And right now, the political right is very, very strong. And not because they have a lot of people and not because they have the votes. It's because they have a very strong voice in the parliament and in the government. And when you look at the people, actually, people in Turkey don't use religion as a discriminatory tool. And people have been religious way back when. And since I was a child, I know people have been religious and people have been really in connection with their cultural heritage. But it's only in the last 10 years that people have been weaponizing religion and weaponizing Islam. And it's only their interpretation of what it should mean and what it should do. And when you look at it, in 10 years ago, people never talked about like women's issues in a negative way and women's issues in a weaponizing way. And nobody said Islam goes against feminism. But right now they're saying that. And that's the point. That's the thing. That's what they're using. They're using religion as a weapon against all of the minorities and all of the opposing voices. So that's what is happening in Turkey. And it's not inherently about religion or the culture. It's about the people that are using them. And when you look at the general public, actually 60-70% of the general public support feminist views and have feminist views. And like a lot of people support LGBTI people, LGBTI rights and inclusion. And so it's really the divide between the politics and the people that is causing this friction. So all of the things that you see, all of the political things that are happening in Turkey, all of the news that you read is actually not reflective of the society, but of the politics. So you need to be really in tap with the community and you really listen to the community about what is happening to know what is happening in the country. Like most of you probably know about Istanbul Pride and how it's been attacked, and our Pride right now and how it's been attacked. But you don't know about all of the small marches that are going on in very, very small cities with 5-6 people, or you don't know about like how people gather for like we have an organization called Queer Olympics where they do sporting events for queer people, and they have been doing that for the last 3 years, and they're doing it right now as an online event. So we have all of these beautiful different things that are happening in the country, but the only things that filter out and go to the internet and then to the news is the really, really horrible things of oppression, of like religious extremism, and then like violence. And it's such a beautiful and great community that we have, but all of the things that are left is just this huge story of oppression. So what I would suggest that you would do is just get into contact with local LGBTI organizations. We have a lot of organizations that speak English and that can transfer information to you and have regular English news pages. So then you can read about the community, read about what is happening, not just the really horrible things.
And just adding to that, when you say that what is emanating from the media is government controlled, and we've seen a crackdown also in the last 4 years on progressive, liberal, independent media in Turkey, so that the government right now controls what is read or seen, and even to the extent where social media is also being infringed upon. But because I don't want this to, we are painting a pretty grim picture here, but I think I would like to latch on to that note of hope that was in the last thing that you said, and go back to the last local elections in Turkey, where practically all the major cities were won by mayors from the opposition parties. So is there, I mean, despite the government controlling the media and the narrative and being able to spread all their hatred without being contradicted, is there a hope for not only for the LGBTI plus community, but also for Turkey to maintain the secular democracy that has lasted now for 97 years?
So my answer is going to be yes and no. Yes, because obviously the people are so vibrant and so open and so ready for integration of different cultures and different people. But the thing is, it's not going to be happening without a fight and without a struggle. So there are a lot of activists around the country that are trying to make this change happen. And like the recent elections is a really good example, because the government actually did not like the results of the Istanbul election because they lost one of the biggest, like the largest city in the country, which had 25 million people. So it's a huge city. And so when they lost the election, they had the election remade, and it was done again, and the opposing party actually won with a landslide. So the thing is, so if you organize, if you get people involved, if you use social media, and if you get people to care about your cause, then it's going to work out. But if you don't, if you just let it be, and if you just assume that everything is going to be okay, it's not going to work. So it's really important that you support local activists in doing what they do best, because we have a community of people that believe in this change and believe that Turkey is a secular country, and Turkey is going to be a huge beacon of hope in the next couple of years. But we need to make that happen, and we need support for that. And international support goes a very long way for that, because we cannot do that alone. And like right now, there's a law being discussed in our parliament that is on banning the entire social media network. So we're struggling with that, and we're struggling with huge oppression. And like I was arrested so many times, and I was put into jail for one day, but it was still a very important day. I come from a background like this, but I'm still fighting, and I'm not the only one. There are so many people that have it way worse than I do, and still continue to fight. So we need support, and with the right support and with the right network, we are going to be able to succeed. And the Ankara ban was lifted. Can you imagine in an area where Erdogan is in its strongest, and the AKP government and the conservatives are super, super strong, and they have the votes, and they have the parliament, and they have the presidency. They lost a court case saying that the court actually said this is against human rights, and LGBTI people have the freedom of expression and have the freedom of assembly. So when we win a court case like this, it is huge. And it is only through the efforts of activists that we are able to do that. So that's where we are.
And when you say that you need our support, I mean, one thing is organizing an event like this. Another thing is, as you said, go to our website and read about the situation and make sure that you're informed. But what would be of more consequence for you that we as an international community outside of Turkey did to support?
Well, you can write to your embassies, because embassies, especially in Turkey, do a lot of work, and they support us in many other ways. They come to our trials to do trial monitoring, so to make sure the trial is fair. They support us in other ways. They come to our demonstrations and things like that. So embassies are a really important tool that you can actually tap into. One other thing is raising awareness. So international attention goes a long way when you're organizing a protest, because if there is no international attention to a protest, police are going to be more violent. That's a fact. But if there is international attention, if there is international media present, if there is celebrities present, they're not going to be as violent. They're not going to be attacking you with plastic bullets to the head. So we need your support in raising this international attention to that, and even just one tweet or just one post is going to be doing a lot of favor to us. And actually, last year, there was this huge social media campaign that was for the trial, and it was really, really helpful, because we saw that the court case shifted in perspective, and we saw that international attention really, really helped. And I think the reason that we won the administrative court case is because of all of the international attention that is happening. So if you want us to succeed, then we need some awareness. And for you to be aware, you need to be in contact with us or just following us on what we're doing. Because local activists cannot do this alone. So we need your support.
I was present at the first meeting of the court back in November, and it was a very long meeting and a lot of talking and shouting back and forth. And at one point, I think we all had a sense that this was going to be thrown out of court, and then it wasn't. And then it has been postponed and postponed again and again. Is that because the government is trying to divert attention from it in order to be able to convict, or is it because they think that they're in a bit of a tight spot and want people to look the other way when they actually drop the charges? Or what is your sense that will, if you have a sense of it, that this is going to end up in?
No, well, Turkey is a very strange country when it comes to legal issues. So when you think for like 100% certainty that a court case has no backing and then it's going to fall through, people actually get charged and people actually get convicted. And when you think a court case has all of the evidence and everything to go through, then it just gets dropped. So we have a very strange legal system, and political pressure actually helps a lot, because when you have a lot of media attention and international attention in a court case, it cannot be thrown out. They cannot charge you very easily, and they cannot attack you very easily. But the thing about our court case specifically is that it's a very huge one in freedom of expression, and it has very wide-ranging consequences. So it's going to be very consequential. So the judge is actually trying to postpone it as much as they can and lengthen the sentencing, so that when they actually give the sentence, there's not going to be any international organizations present. There's not going to be embassies present, because what they think, what the prosecution team actually thinks, is that if they just postpone it as much as they can, then people's attention is going to slowly fade away, and then everything will be easy for them. And I don't know what's going to happen, but our lawyers were very certain, especially in the first hearing, as Lars said, that the court case was going to be thrown out. Because when you look at the law, and when you look at the law that we're being charged with breaking, there's no way that we would be even in the courtroom. because the law of public demonstrations actually says that you need to be warned first. The police actually needs to warn you, and then they need to wait half an hour, and then they need to warn you again, and then they need to physically remove you, and if you resist to that removal, then they have the right to detain you. But that didn't happen in our Pride. I did not hear the warning, even the first warning, because when they were arresting me and taking me to the police car, then they were doing the warning. And while they were doing the loud warning, they were actually using tear gas, and they were actually arresting people. So this means that this court case has no footing, but it's still been going on for the last year and a half. So I don't know what's going to happen, and legally, I hope that the court case falls through, and I hope that we don't get convicted, because in the Turkish constitution, this court case has no backing, but I don't know what's going to happen, and international attention really, really helps.
So this is a call for all of us to keep showing up, and yes. Now we've talked a little bit or a lot about the legal consequences of this, but I think we can't look away from the personal consequences as well. There are 19 people, students and staff, charged now. The case has been running for over 18 months. You must be living under a lot of pressure. How do you cope with this? Do you have the support of your families? I remember people not wanting to say where they lived during the court case because they didn't want to divulge their addresses and stuff. So what are the personal consequences for people during this?
Oh, wow. We live in a very oppressed country, and we live in a very conservative country, and coming out as an LGBTI person is already really, really hard. And just think that your parents would be finding out that you're LGBT from a court hearing where you're being charged with breaking a law. So it has been very hard for some people, and a lot of people have injuries from that day, and a lot of people have actually trauma from that day, which is very understandable. It's not just the people that were arrested, but a lot of people that saw what happened and experienced what happened actually have trauma. Coming to myself personally, I did have trauma, but I worked through it with counseling. But other than that, I think it's more turned into, first of all, it was rage against the government in saying that, it was so strange to me that they could arrest people for just being into a Pride March, just attending a Pride March. And it was so strange to me that they could arrest us without warning or without doing anything. And when I realized this, when I was talking with the police officers saying that this was a peaceful march, that they were not willing to listen to me. And so it was rage at first, but then I turned it into something constructive, and I turned it into a fuel for my activism. So every single day, I think about the events that happened, and the last year actually, with all of the house raids that happened, police coming into my house at 5 a.m. and then arresting me and taking me into custody, and then just searching through my house. And I take all of these experiences and then put it to use. I say, I don't want any other LGBTI people to live through that. So I don't want any single person going through that, so I need to fight. I need to put something out there that would make it impossible for the police to do that again, and for the government to do that again. So that's what I've been doing, and it really helps me personally to turn that into something constructive. And yeah, I'm going to be keeping doing that for the next, I don't know how long it takes, but as long as it takes, and as long as this fight goes on, because it's not an easy thing to do, especially in a country like this. But I think we're making some little changes along the way, like getting the Ankara ban lifted, getting some things through the parliament, getting some connections with the ministries. So things are happening little by little, and it's through the activism of people. So we need that fuel for the activism, actually.
I could imagine family or parents being there saying, please don't do this. Stop this. You're putting yourself in harm's way. Let other people be responsible for this. How has the reaction been from your family?
Yeah. So I came out to my parents through the national television, which is a strange story because there was this TV network, and it was the time right before Pride, and somebody had to go on to the national television and say that we need the media attention on the Pride. It was just, I think it was like a couple of weeks before Pride. And so I went up and said the things I said, and then my family called me, and then they wanted to have a discussion. So that's how I came out to them. And imagine their surprise when their like first child gets arrested in a Pride March that they organized themselves, and they did not know anything about it a week before. So it was a real shock for them, and we keep having discussions of them asking me not to be involved in the community and not to be such a loud activist. But I think I can calm them down a little now because they know about the risks and they're really supportive. They try to be supportive as much as they can. And I'm very lucky to be in a family where I can talk about these issues and they're willing to listen. Obviously, if they had it their way, I wouldn't be such a loud activist. I wouldn't be upfront. But I am who I am, and I like being an activist, and I like helping people as much as I can. So they try to accept it.
And I remember your parents being there throughout the trial and bringing water for everybody and just showing their support in a very practical manner as well. Do you see consequences for the Turkish LGBTI community as well, that fewer people are ready to step up to the plate and become activists, that people are afraid of the consequences, so that it is having a negative impact on the community as such?
Obviously, we have less people coming out to marches and less people coming out to events, and that's because of the pressure that we have. But at the same time, last year I knew, like after the Pride March, that because we are a student-based organization, and students are usually very afraid for their education and very afraid from their parents. So last year I was sure that we would have no new members that year because we had the police attack and we were arrested and things were going really, really bad. But to my surprise, we had much more people coming into the Solidarity than we had the years before. So the reason for this is when you do activism and when you're open about it and when you're brave, when you defy the law, and when you present yourself and present the cause that you have, then much more people come out and much more people join in on the conversation. So even though there's a huge risk happening, people actually want to come out and people actually want to join in on the fight. So even if we lose some people and even if we lose some attendees, we are gaining more and more activists, and we are gaining more and more people that want to be on the field. It's a mixed bag, basically.
So I just learned now that we've managed to get a connection through to Öykü Sidem, who is the chairperson for the Turkish LGBTI plus group on the Bar Association. Do we have Öykü online?
Hi, can you get me through?
Yes.
Hi.
We don't have sound on that, so...
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you. Now the sound is going through.
I've been all around with you for the last 40 minutes.
Yes, I had not been told until literally 10 seconds ago. I'm sorry for that.
I know, because I had to contact the kind person at the organization. I realized that you were not aware of my presence.
But we're very happy that you're here. And in the last 14 minutes, perhaps you've been able to listen in on the conversation that we've had?
Yes, actually I had been listening to the conversation.
Yes. So I'd like to ask you, as a lawyer and from a legal standpoint, where do you see both the case, we've heard Melike's view on this, but from a legal standpoint and as a lawyer, where do you see this court case go? And how do you see the role of the Turkish Bar Association in combating there? This is actually... Oh, there you go. We've got the right person on now. I didn't recognize you before because it was a different person. But there you are.
Firstly, I warmly greet Copenhagen Pride. And thanks
Thank
for
you.
inviting me to join you.
Thank you so much for being here.
Pride too.
Thank you. Have you been able to listen in on the conversation we've had?
Yes, I did. I did listen to everything you were discussing about, particularly Melike's explanation, splendid explanation of what the situation, how the situation was.
Yes.
And what now?
From a legal standpoint, how can you add to what has already been said? How do you think the trial is going to go, and how do you see the situation?
The Center for LGBTQ plus rights of the Bar Association, an ex-member of the Venice Commission, the European Commission for Democracy Through Law, a professor at the Hacettepe University. Warmly greet the audience. Thanks for inviting. And thanks to anybody involved in the organization. So we have established our center in the year 2018 on the 10th of December. This is the International Human Rights Day, because legal support was extremely difficult to organize to the LGBTQ plus communities in Turkey. So, and the NGO lawyers were already overwhelmed. There has already been a number of lawyers defending fiercely and proudly and very successfully, but we needed to engage bar associations too, because, you know, we represent, the Ankara Bar Association represents 10,000s of lawyers working in a huge metropolitan area. So let me put what happens to the LGBTQ plus in two perspectives. Not that the LGBTQ was all free, even before Erdogan. I mean, here we should have to see the generic context of the defending LGBTQ rights also in the world. This is an ongoing struggle. It has not yet been completed in any state of the world. So it is the dynamics of this rights struggle which affected Turkey all along, even before Erdogan. If you read the texts and articles, media reports, what was happening on the ground up until Erdogan, there was already a certain level of homophobic sentiments or transphobia. You could observe that. However, a vibrant and a very strong activism emerged in the 90s particularly, that attracted the attention of the general public. LGBTIQ plus became more visible. So if you become more visible, it is obvious that you could be, drawing some attention to yourself and some reactions. There is one context. But what the new government for the last 15 years did is the transformation of the land in other areas as well, which could be actually captured maybe in 4 areas since 2016, particularly. Can you follow me?
Yes. Oh, sorry.
Can you follow me?
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. First, the organization and structure of the state has been modified. So it is a transformation we have been experiencing. Maybe from a more or less middle level or upper middle level democracy to a low incentive, from to a low intensity, most optimistically, but pessimistically, an authoritarian or even a totalitarian transformation. The second is the profile of the criminal law and criminal procedural law, as well as the penitentiary, including administrative and even civil law, has been modified to reflect authoritarian traits and primitivize. Third is the fundamental principles of institutional guarantees surrounding the judiciary has been almost abrogated. They have been abrogated. And a Führerwille, so the will of the Führer, is the basis of legal reforms emerged. And sixth, public political discourse on legal reforms as well as on trials and their outcomes has been controlled. And seventh, this is the most important one for our purposes, the social ideological as well as a cultural program has been implemented, and they are still being implemented and reflected itself in the will of changing the, let's say, alliances of the state, whether to west or to the east, whether to the laws and international obligations, or to what we might capture under the term a political morality, a political ideology of the regime. So it's reflected in deconstitutionalization on the one hand, which began in the year 2017, and a de facto deparliamentarization. So it is indispensable that such developments wouldn't have affected our situation in a society in which there were already tensions against the LGBTQ communities. It's not only in the past, it was not only related to the government or to the authorities, but to a certain extent, even to some, say, leftist circles or nationalistic leftist circles. Because like in Russia, also in Turkey, the LGBTQ plus communities are seen as purporters of the Western ideological stance. So it's for them an ideological, let's say, division among those lines that has international and geostrategic connotations, I would say. But let me also summarize the latest developments which began during the pandemic, which is, according to me, part of these transformations propagated by the government. I mean, LGBTQ plus is technically legal in Turkey, but hate speech and crimes are epidemic and fueled by homophobic speech from government officials. And in April, it reached up to a very intense level. On April 24, amid the coronavirus pandemic, the head of Turkey's Presidency of Religious Affairs declared during a sermon broadcast over state television on the first day of Ramadan, that homosexuality brings with it illnesses and decay to lineage. Previously, the same official claimed homosexual and unmarried people were responsible for the spread of HIV. In a thinly veiled call for violence against LGBTIQ plus people, he urged listeners this Ramadan to take action together to protect people from these evils. And actions people took were all over the places. In Twitter lynch campaigns, also on the ground, in the violence you had to observe in the street. And later than that, the president and interior minister joined the rhetoric of the religious authority, describing homosexual as perverts. And in statements that made headlines in Turkey, made calls to the public to come out against those who display any kind of perversion forbidden by God. He also targeted allies of those who are LGBTIQ+, saying that those who support such marginal movements, contrary to our faith and culture, are partners in the same heresy. So these remarks followed statements by Kerem Kınık, chairman of the Red Crescent Society of Turkey, a humanitarian organization, that LGBT people violate health creation, in a tweet at the end of Pride Month, when humanitarian organizations including Red Cross and Red Crescent societies condemned these despicable remarks. Turkish lawmakers, religious leaders, and the president rallied to his defense. So, indeed, we are now in such a climate in which even the Istanbul Convention, protecting both women and the LGBTQI+ communities against violence, is debated, and in the direction whether the government is going to leave that convention altogether. What did we do since April as the Bar Association? Actually, we had already a Center for LGBTQ+ rights, which, of course, encouraged our colleagues who were not directly involved in protecting or defending LGBT rights to be part of the discussion, and we raised much awareness in that direction. Given that there was already the first center of the country at the Bar Association, our board, in a written statement, in a more or less also fears the way the religious authority fears, reacted against the religious authorities' statement. And since it used, they claim, a language targeting Islam, all of these triggered actions followed the debate or the fight, let's put it that way, between the religious authority and my own Bar Association. My Bar Association has already gained, since our very foundation, I mean of the Center for LGBTQ rights, already developed a certain awareness and resolution to answer in each and every occasion, and took the opportunity to press release numerous statements since 2018 on the LGBT.
Thank you for this very thorough run through. We just have one question from the room.
This is my last sentence, maybe before
okay,
the
sorry.
question. This led to the proposal of a new draft law creating multiple bar associations and weakening the position of the bars to defend human rights in general, if not clearly the LGBTQ rights too, because we provide free support, voluntary support to human rights communities and individuals, to the individuals whose human rights were infringed upon. So that law is now, or draft law is now law. In July, we had to demonstrate widely against the introduction of such a law.
Yes.
But it became,
Can I interrupt you for a
unfortunately,
second and just bring in one
Yeah.
question from the room?
Yeah.
We've got one at the back here.
Yes, firstly, I'd like to thank the two women on the panel. Thank you so much for being here. I think you are strong and brave and beautiful. Well done. Thank you. I met you earlier very briefly. You spoke about the importance of chanting within your pride and how that's quite different to other prides. And I was just wondering if you could maybe teach us very briefly a quick chant and how we can support and maybe the room can get behind that.
So, were you
actually-
placed by Bushra specifically? Yeah. Okay.
And this means that everybody has to join in now, okay?
Just to give a little background, because like I know a lot of people in prides here don't do chants, but it's a very important tool for us to express what we want and what we need. And so there's this one chant that we use, which really doesn't mean a lot when you put it into words, but it has been a chant that has been used for the last 10 years, maybe more, and especially in our pride, I was doing that when I was being arrested, and a lot of people did that, and it's a very responsive chant as well, so
The
Bushra will teach you.
specific chant just goes back and forth with one person chanting first, and then the other people in the group say something back, and it's really, really simple, and it has a really stupid story actually. Okay, so
There are two stories. First one is that there was this song that happened and then people got inspiration, but that's wrong. So the story is there was this huge Pride March in Turkey, and then somebody got lost and they were actually looking for their partner, and so they chanted, "Where are you, my love?" And they actually shouted out, and then the crowd, the entire crowd responded, "We are here, my love." So that's the story.
one of my favorite chants.
So it's not only showing that it's not only just a stupid chant, but just a show of solidarity of all of the people there, and then just a show of the love that is happening there, and then all the acceptance and just this queer presence there. And so maybe we can do that. Bushra will teach you now.
So I said it's really simple. Do you want to do this chant with us, by the way? Okay, so but you have to shout because I will be shouting, and as you saw before, I'm a really anxious person. Okay, I'm gonna say buradayım aşkım. Neredesin aşkım? And then you're gonna say buradayım aşkım. Okay, practice session. Okay, I'm gonna say neredesin aşkım? And then you're gonna say buradayım aşkım. Buradayım aşkım. Buradayım aşkım. Evet. Yeah. And we're gonna get louder and louder and louder. And then we're gonna say I. And then it ends. Okay? Are you ready? Neredesin aşkım? Neredesin aşkım? Neredesin aşkım? Neredesin aşkım? Ay.
And
Thank
that's
you
the
so
first
much,
time
you were
we
great.
did that without getting arrested in this year, so that was great.
So thank you for coming. Thank you for being such a great inspiration for all of us in the activist movement, for sharing the reality of Turkey right now. I also see a task ahead for all of us sitting here in reinstating reinstating the conversation with our politicians around the situation in Turkey, but also finding a way to get restarted the accession agreement negotiations between Turkey and the EU, because I actually, from what you said, see a big burden of responsibility on the EU for stopping the negotiations and thereby turning Turkey away from Europe. So I think those would be the takeaways from me today, that we need to, from where we are, support, show up at the court case, show up at prides in Turkey, share on social media, and talk to our politicians about how we can make sure that Turkey is not allowed to turn away from the European community and our European partnership of values, but remain as a secular democracy in the bosom of Europe. Thank you so much.